अभी हुआ है।
वो दबा के रखा चालू करो, उनका फोन है, लेक्चर चालू नहीं हुआ।
अच्छा, तो कॉल करेंगे। ठीक है।
चालू करो, लेक्चर पढ़ा करो और माइक बांध दो, हटने मत दो, पीछे बांध दो। हाँ, वो बांध दो।
हो गया? Okay. Hello students. Quite frequently we use the term research in both academic institutions as well as government institutions these days. The problem with conducting the research study is not on how the research study is going to be conducted in number, but the problem lies in the quality of the research which is conducted. So basically, we would rather prefer to have quality lesser number of research studies than a surplus quantity of unethical research practices. To engage with this idea, we are going to discuss this module of research methodology. The reason why research methodology is important is because of the reason that, for example, if we take social sciences, we do see a lot of quotations, we do see a lot of word spilling which takes place. Now, in such a situation, it becomes very essential for us to have a solid methodology. This module of research methodology would therefore enable the researcher to understand the pedagogy of research, that is what goes into the making of a good research, to familiarize with the different concepts and methods which we use in research studies, and also to assist you in both the exploratory and the result-oriented research studies. So in today's module, we would learn about the basic concept of research, what is the meaning of research, what objective the research study is meant to serve, the motivation behind conducting a research, types of research, the differences between research methods and research methodology, and research design. Now, what exactly is research? The word research, when we divide the word, it is a compounded word comprising of research, something which has been already found and you present to it into a knowable manner. So basically, the word research is nothing but it is a search for knowledge, a systematic and scientific approach for information in a particular topic. So the topic can be anything. Nowadays we find government agencies funding researchers to acquire data and statistics on issues that are pertinent towards the larger functioning of the society. So basically, in common parlance, the word research itself implies a set of systems which is scientific by nature and which would in turn aid to a effective management of the studies. So basically, research would consist of a careful inquiry into the study of knowledge, any form of knowledge, thereby adding on facts which are newer in nature and moreover contributing to the already existing concept system. Now, it also encompasses a manipulation of things, of concepts and symbols for the purpose of generalization. So, research itself implies that the idea is already there. Human beings by nature are very inquisitive by nature. So, out of curiosity, people tend to probe deeper and deeper into things. Now, in order to get to the deeper end of the things, it is essential for a person to employ certain modes of manipulation, certain modes of correction. So, basically, in research, we do nothing but we go into the unknown to the known. That is, in research, we take a certain topic of study and we manipulate it, control it, modify it so that we attain the higher light of study. Now, what is the primary objective of research? The primary objective of research is to bring light to particular notions in any field of study. Now, when I say light into any field of study, it implies that in research, the known is already there, and so is the need to find the unknown. So, in the very first gist of research, our main objective is to present the unknown in tune with the known to the audience who wants that particular field of study. Now, what happens in this process? We try to gain a familiarity with the already existing field of study, and then on we develop newer insights for the same. So, this type of method of study, where from a given aspect of knowledge system, we go deeper, probe deeper into it and gain more insights, is also known as a formulative or exploratory method of research study. Now, research also enables us to describe a particular individual, situation or group. Very often we see social scientists specifically deployed in areas where there is social unrest. The social scientists adapt themselves to such a setting and they give us an idea on how a particular group is behaving in that particular point of time. For example, we see social scientists deployed in war-torn areas. Now, the war-torn areas are basically away from the civilian zone. But here what we see, in order to understand the ongoings of the war, both from the civilian's perspective as well as from the administrative perspective, we do send people into such modes of areas, and that is where the descriptive research study takes place. Now, research also enables us to test the frequency of occurrence and its association with allied factors. Very often, we see that certain researchers have diagnostic methods. That is, if you are suffering from symptoms A, B, C, D, E, then might be you are suffering from that particular disease. Now, how would we say, for example, today if you are feeling unwell, we would go through a checklist, that is the diagnostic measures, A, B, C, D, E. We would seek through a methodological and systematic approach whether you are having that symptoms and whether at what frequency the symptoms are bothering you or not to diagnose a particular ailment. So this is where the diagnostic studies takes place. Then, we have another set of objectives, that is of forming up a hypothetical situation. A hypothesis is nothing but a set of predictions by which we carry on or we form the base of our study. So in hypothetical studies, what we do is we establish a relationship between the hypothesis, that is the statements by which we are predicting a certain amount of outcome, with the variable, that is the factors through which that experiment is going to be tested. So these are the objectives of research. Now, after going through these objectives, you might realize, why take the pain? Why should you carry out the research? For this, we come to the next segment, which is about motivation in research. Now, why do we take research largely? Largely, we take research to reap benefits. Why? If you get a PhD degree, you'll get appointed in a good place, you'll reap the consequential benefits. So firstly, we take up research. One motivating factor could be to take up research in order to reap consequential benefits, face challenges in solving unsolved problems. Like we said, human beings are very inquisitive by nature. So, the motivating factor of a research would be to know the unknown from the known, to find the truth from the untruth, to find the accuracy in the form of error. Then find practical solutions to lingering problems. Practical solutions to lingering problems would arise only when a research scientist is placed and given a setting where he conducts all of the required paradigm of a good research, and then he brings the accuracy of his results to light in front of the people. So, practical solutions to lingering problems could be any socio-economic and cultural problem. You also get an intellectual joy out of a creative work. A good research would entail of a good report writing, a thesis, a dissertation. So what happens in that process? At the end of the day, a good research is always a written work, be it from the scientific background, be it from the creative background, be it from the artistic background, be it from commerce. Every research is presented in the form of a dissertation. So what happens? You get an intellectual joy by employing your creativity to get your desired goals. Now, it also aids government institutions to inquire and understand causal relationships for better scientifically and socially progressive society at large. Government institutions are the very important agencies for creating good research. Why? Because this is the money bank of a research. That is, majority of the researchers are founded and funded by government institutions. Now, why does government institutions play an important role? We know media is called the fourth pillar of democracy. So when we use the help of media, or we use the help of any other research scientist for any particular method as well, we know that the entire process of any epidemic, pandemic, or whatever it is, or any social crisis is being recorded. Recording is important. Documentation is important. So, what happens when you record and document? It stays on forever. The accumulated knowledge is there. So, when you want to progress from there, you do not have to begin from scratch. You already have the existing form of research done, and from there you expand your knowledge base for newer insights, which is the reason why we have a government agency fully devoted to research and development. Now, types of research. Based on the viewpoints of many social scientists, it was decided that the research methodology would first be clustered into types of research. Now, these types were based from application point of view, objective point of view, and inquiry point of view. Now, when we call about application point of view, what happens is, in these type of research, you see how you can apply the already given set of ideas to gain better insight. Then you have objective kind of point of view where you have a particular set desired goal. And in this goal, what you would do, you would go through the various factors, and with those goals in mind, you would specifically see to what you want to see. Then you have the inquiry mode where again, given the fact that we need to unearth a certain amount of known truths and unknown truths, we use the inquiry mode. Now, pure research. Pure research is basically fundamental in nature. That is, you have your given sets of concepts, and from there we build on. Then you have applied research. Applied research all kinds of research in the next slide. But just to give a gist, we have descriptive research, exploratory research, then correlational research, explanatory research, and quantitative and qualitative forms of research. Now, descriptive versus analytical research. Now, descriptive researchers include surveys and fact-finding inquiries. Suppose a new product is launched in the market. Now, descriptive research studies would include conducting surveys and fact-finding inquiries. For example, if we introduce a shampoo in the market, now a research scientist who is employing the descriptive mode would conduct a survey. Like, do you use this shampoo regularly? Is this found to be useful? Have you been able to afford the shampoo, and so on and like. So what is happening? This set of questionnaires is nothing but the survey. Now, fact-finding inquiries. What happens in this? The survey which I have given you, do you like it, do you not like it, would let me know the pros and cons of launching that product in the market. So, in descriptive research, we include the surveys and fact-finding inquiries to know whether the specified product has been able to meet the desired goal or not. Now, the major purpose of the descriptive research is description of the state of affairs as it exists in the present state. Apart from the product, if I give you the example of an area which is facing an acute shortage of water supply. Now, I sent a correspondent over there, I sent a research scientist over there. Now, what the research scientist would do is, first, he will ask each and every inhabitant of this area how long this problem has been going on, is there any solution to it, and if not, why is the solution not for the acute water supply crisis. Now, in descriptive research, what you are doing, when you go to a particular setting, nothing is happening, but you are just trying to find out the way the situation has been placed. So you go to area A, there is acute scarcity of water, and you are trying to find out the responses towards it and the solutions towards it. Now, the researcher hardly has control over the variables and presents things as they are. Now that particular researcher is not a representative of the government. So, if that particular researcher is sent to that particular problem area, what happens is he will just report things as it is. That is, this reporting would imply he is just describing things as they are. He has absolutely no control. He has no clue whatsoever to solve the crisis. But what is he doing? He is blindly noting down or describing the crisis. So basically here the researcher has absolutely no control over the variables. No water, water is a variable, water pipeline is not working, they are not sending water, that's another variable. So the researcher has no option but to present things as they are. Now, in analytical research, the researcher makes use of the available resources and engages in a critical evaluation of the pros and cons of the topic. In the descriptive mode, the researcher went, he reported things, he has absolutely no control. Now what is he doing? He's reporting things, he's describing things. For what? To achieve a particular purpose. Now what happens? This reporter goes back to the authority. Now in front of the authority, he will describe, he will analyze whatever description he has seen as to find the reasons why water is not being supplied to that area. So from there, he can deduce that probably there is a leakage in the pipeline, there's no maintenance person to do the maintenance work, and so on and forth. So the analysis happens and the pros and cons are equally distributed in analytical research. Next we come to applied versus fundamental research. I'll just give you an example of two institutes in Mumbai. In applied research, we do have institutes like Institute of Applied and Chemical Sciences, and in fundamental research we have, say, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. Now, applied and fundamental would imply two things. The first is the research can be applied. Applied, what is it indicating? It is indicating that an action is being done. And fundamental, that is your core research, is the purer form of research. Now, applied research basically deals with finding solutions to imminent topics, like, say, in a given official setup, people report of workplace harassment. Now that is a form of applied research. So you go to that particular workplace, you find out if the women are treated right or wrong, you apply the theories of feminism, you apply the theories of organizational psychology. So what is happening? You are borrowing in terms, you are putting it into action to find a solution to your desired research goal. While fundamental research is considered with generalizations and formulations of theories. We often see scientists who deal with gene mapping. So here they have all the DNA, they have their prototypes, they have their cell structure, so on and so forth. So what happens? The DNA has always existed, the cell structure has already existed, the prototypes, everything has existed from a known period of time. So in fundamental research, these scientists would basically gather the already gathered information and develop it further. For example, now in fundamental research nowadays we find scientists trying to see how the DNA can be altered, and through genetic mapping they can alter as well as stop the genetic deformities in a child. So the cell is there, the DNA is there, that sort of knowledge is already there since time immemorial. And from the basis of these, what happens is we try to find out the generalizations of this theory. The next is researchers to find the socio-economic and political trends are applied researchers, while those relating to pure mathematical concepts, human behavior or theories are fundamental researchers. So, like I said, in applied form of research studies, we study a social area. What is the rate of successful marriages in a Muslim-dominated Hindu society? What we are doing? Applying concepts of secularism, we are applying philosophical concepts, and from there we are building on the structure of applied studies. We have economic conditions. How? We apply the basic principles of economics, like say the demand and supply curve. So, if I am producing 5,000 toys a day, is that sufficient to sustain a family? Is there a demand for 5,000 toys a day? So the economic aspects are taken into consideration. Then we have political trends. We will not go into it because every day we are studying Dalit studies, we are studying the Marxist studies, capitalist studies, all of which goes into the governings of the society. So we have the leftist standings, the rightist standings, and how each of these are applied in a given setting to give rise to cultural problems or to solve the cultural issues. All of these goes into applied sciences. Now, with the fundamental scientists, they just deal with the basis of human behavior, human nature, and mathematical concepts and so on and forth. Next we go to quantitative versus qualitative research. Now, quantitative researchers consist of phenomenon which can be expressed in terms of quantity or amount, whereas qualitative research is concerned with phenomena involving the subjectivity of any kind. It is specifically used in behavioral studies to understand the underlying factors of human motives. Quantitative research. Today I launch a product in the market. I want to see how the product is doing in the market, why is it not doing well, and so on and forth. For example, there's this very famous 1 rupee candy which Parle had introduced. Now that candy took over the market like fire. Why? Because it was a small candy which cost a nominal 1 rupee, which is like nothing in today's economy, but it delivered a good taste. That is, that product stood by the desired goals by which it was created. So in factors like that, to understand the market of a product and all, we use quantitative research. Qualitative research is specifically used in behavioral sciences. We often have the concept of people who forget things, but there are also a group of people who have a super memory. They'll never forget things. It's actually a disorder called hyperthymesia. Now what happens in qualitative research, because that individual is not able to forget anything, what happens? The individual tries to adopt a binary system of knowledge through which he is able to communicate to the society whatever he desires. Now, to understand all of these, the feelings of a person, the various means which he is employing to be a part of the society, the ways in which society is interacting and understanding his needs, all of these goes into a qualitative form of research. Now, we again have conceptual versus empirical research. Now, in conceptual research, it is a kind of study where abstract ideas or theories are studied and the development of newer philosophical concepts or reinterpretation of existing concepts are seen. For example, in philosophy, there is a concept of tabula rasa. That is what? The mind is an empty slate. When a child is born, the child is blank, like a slate. What happens is when the child grows up, the child, through his acquired experiences of motor as well as sensory abilities, the child learns to communicate. The child then on processes, or in turn, we could say the child carries on information through which he develops it. Now we have another group of scientists who say, like Descartes used to say, I am, therefore I am. Now what does that imply? There's another group of scientists who says that no, a child is not an empty slate. A child is not born dumb. A child already has his or her own innate capabilities, which is why you see certain theories imply that when a mother is expecting, you are supposed to play music, you're supposed to sing nursery rhymes, you're supposed to do everything possible to have a genetically highly intelligent child. So what happens? This is doing away from the current theory of tabula rasa to giving in newer insights that no, a child is actually receptive to pain while it's in the womb. A child can actually hear us. The child can actually see. The child can actually feel when it's in the mother's womb. So, what is happening? We are reinterpreting the existing concept to give rise to a newer set of ideas. Now, empirical research, on the other hand, relies on experience observation alone. It is a data-based research where the hypothesis and conclusions or decisions can be further verified into experiments and observations. The same study of a child being able to hear or not, or the study where J.C. Bose had once said that plants can feel, while the other group of scientists can say plants cannot feel, plants do not have any reactivity towards movement. When this kind of statements are let out, what happens is we have the empirical group of research scientists who would go into the deeper root of the matter via observations or via hypothesis. For example, when it was propagated that plants have life, this group of empirical scientists, what did they do? They went into modes of observation, they recorded the plant movements during the process of photosynthesis and time after that, and then they came out with another concept that plants do not have feelings, they are just responsive to the sunlight, and hence people tend to say they have life. Or similarly, in case of babies too, they say that no, the baby is in a warm and meiotic sex, so the baby cannot feel anything. The baby is just there. So all the studies where the conceptual idea or the abstract ideas are studied and are tested and verified belongs to the empirical form of research. Now we have the research approaches. Given the previous example, you could see that some research approaches like that of whether the baby can feel or the baby cannot feel, it could be logical for some, it could be illogical for someone else. So basically, we have these four research processes, that is the logical or the theoretical approach, the quantitative or the experimental approach, the qualitative or the observational approach, and the participatory approach. Now, in logical approaches, the assumptions are made. So what happens in a logical approach? Basically, we start assuming from a given set of theory the ideas, and from there we try to induce or deduce for the larger universal knowledge matter. So from one set of assumption we jump into the so-called logically sounding conclusions, which are also called new theories. Now we have the quantitative or experimental approach. Now this is basically divided into three types: the hypothesis, the experiment, and the theory. Hypothesis is nothing but a predictive statement. Now what is a predictive statement? When you approach a particular area of study, the main work of hypothesis is to give you a predictive statement that this particular thing will work in certain given settings, and this situation and this kind of work will not work in the other set of settings. So what happens to find out? You conduct an experiment. Now in a case of hypothesis, say let's take the example of a hypothetical situation where I devise a machine and I say that this machine will take over the human race. I create a robot, I train the robot. My hypothetical statement is, if I train the robot to that extent that it learns all the desired human knowledge database that is already there, it can lead a normal life, it can lead a situation where it is no less than a human being, and in fact it will be a better version of the same. You have this robot now which is launched named Sophia. Now Sophia has been given a citizenship as well. Why? Because the sole aim of the makers of Sophia is to see how in a given setting the robot is able to live up to those expectations. This quantitative experiment, in order to elucidate it further, I will give you the example of Galatia 2.2. Now Galatia 2.2 is about a robot which was created, and the creators of the robot decided to test it with a human being. That is, the experiment took place. Now during the experiment, what did it do? The robot and the human being both were kept in a room. They were given a set of English literature to memorize. Now what happened? The robot, or the cyborg in this case, named Helen learned everything about post-colonialism, about the ongoings of the society at that point of time, and any and everything which literature provided at that time. Now, the same thing was given, the same material was given to Richard. Now what happened is, during the experiment, in order to test whether the robot is better then the human being is put under a certain set of conditions, what happened? They were tested on grounds that they were given a test and they both were asked to write the particular test. Now, what happened is, in that particular setting, the human being, what he did, he wrote the answers as much as he could in order to achieve an A grade. Now, what about the robot? The robot went into a philosophical mode. Instead of objectively writing the answers, the robot decided to say, this human life amuses me, I do not want to live it anymore, and then the robot shuts itself. So what happened? Now this theory, whether that robot, if trained into the kind of a human being, is able to live it up to that expectation or not, is falsified, or it is also verified that no matter how much you train a robot, it is a machine at the end of the day. So, in quantitative experiments of such kinds are conducted with a hypothesis in mind in order to find whether the predicted statement stands to the test of time. Now we have qualitative or observational types of study. Now, in qualitative study, the study is empirical in nature and the study is also a description of theory. What happens in this? First, you go into a setting and then you realize the shortcomings of that setting. You describe it, you have absolutely no hold of what the setting is all about, and then you apply the empirical basis. You employ the ideas and you try to see whether those theories fit in with your stressed project or not, and then you come with ample solutions. Then we also have participatory action. In participatory action processes, a given setting is there where you go, you employ your ideas, you employ your theories, and you come up with newer theories. Now, why did you come up with newer theories is again studied. So, the process is continuous in participatory action. So, today, if there is an epidemic going on, what happens is, you do an empirical study on why the disease is caused. You go and you establish the theory that, say for this Ebola virus, this epidemic has started, and so on and so on. So you devise your own theory on how to do away with the Ebola virus. Then what happens? The research scientists would create certain injections, certain medicines to do away with it. Now you employ another study whether the created medicines are sufficient enough to get rid of the epidemic or not. So what is happening? Everyone is getting involved. There is participation, there is a real life variable, and it's a continuous process. With this we come to the next slide, which is about research methods versus research methodology. All this while, I started with research methodology, but I was employing the term research methods continuously. Now, research methods are definitely the ways the behavior and instruments by which a research is conducted. And research methodology is the art of studying how a research is done. That is, in research methodology, what we do is we conduct the research, and in research methodology we study the ways and means in which the research is conducted. Now, research methods can be further classified into three types. The first is collection of data. The second is culmination between the known and unknown. And thirdly, the critical interruptions of the same, the critical interpretations you give. For example, in a disease-inflicted area, you go from house to house, trying to find out how many houses are affected and how many diseased persons are there, is it contagious, is the disease spreading or not, and so on and so forth. Then you culminate all this information that we know, say 500 reports of Ebola flu is reported. Now, with that, we'll culminate the unknown knowledge. Out of this, say 250 people are said to have the contagious kind of flu. So it's getting passed on from one person to another, and it's getting multiplied. Now, why is it getting multiplied, and what precautions can be taken? Is it feasible to take these precautions or not? All of these are the critical interpretations of the same. Now, this is an overview of a primary research method. We'll go into the secondary research method later on in the next unit of the module. So, in a primary research method, when you go into an area, these are the things which you will usually tend to relate with. To begin with, you will see if the answers that you are looking for can be responded accurately. So, what happens that when people or the research scientist goes on to question the people who are inflicted with certain diseases or disorder, you have to find out whether they are faking it for the greed of better comfort, or they are actually able to understand and answer to your questions which are in tune with your study. So, opinions form a very important aspect. Now, does the question involve opinions or behaviors is also there. Many people can give opinions that, in my opinion, I am not feeling well today, you better understand that I am sick today. But does my behavior say so? So there's a stark difference between opinions and behavior. That behavior has to be relevant. If I tell you I'm not feeling well right now, my behavior should show. My behavior should assert you that, okay, generally I'm not feeling well. Now, the relevance of my behavior would give you the idea that whether I am the eligible subject for the research you are conducting or not. Right. So, after this, the process of experimentation starts. Now, the process of experimentation starts in a way that, okay, if I am ill, I will see whether you respond to the medicine, or I might not give you medicine, just so in order to check whether you are actually feigning illness or not. In many times, we see scientists using the placebo effect in order to see whether a painkiller is actually giving you, or tricking the individual with some candies and saying that it's a painkiller, go take it. And psychologically, there are changes, the physiological changes, where even if it is a candy, that person will come and say, oh, I am feeling very well, thank you for the medicine. So, these changes are very important. Then we scan the data. That is, if the data collected, the data analyzed has been found that, okay, this area is indeed affected, we scan on the records of that particular area. We see about the previous behavior, if whether there were previous illness which had inflicted, could it be because of that those people are getting infected now? the hygienic condition of the place in which people are there, and so forth. So what is this? We are observing. Now the observation is happening. Now post the observation, you go and decide whether you want your research to be more exploratory or precision-based research. Now in exploratory-based research, you go and try to know the inherent problems. You conduct individual interviews. You focus on the problem group. You segregate the groups, like group A is suffering from fever, group B is suffering from, say, vomiting, group C is suffering from something else. So you are exploring, and then you already have a diagnostic manual ready that if these people are suffering from symptom A, B and C, only then they would fill the bill of exploratory research. Precision-based research is you go to that area, you are 100% sure that there is an outbreak of the Ebola virus. You cordon off the entire area, and with precision in your mind, you start giving the modes of treatment. So this is how basically a primary research method is carried out. Now, in research, we study the various steps adopted by the researcher in studying the research problem along with the logic behind it. So what happens? Let me go back to the previous slide. In this slide, the logic of seeing the opinion and behavior was to undermine whether that person was genuinely sick or not. So what you do, you go to that area and say you take two forms of painkillers. Now one is a candy and one is the actual painkiller. Now both sets of people or both sets of subjects say they are not feeling well. In one group you give the actual medicine, and in the other group you do not give the actual medicine. Now the logic behind doing that is to assure yourself that that set of people are genuinely sick and they need the medicine, they are capable of allowing you to progress with your research. So it is very important that we study the various steps adopted in order to find the logic behind what the research is carried upon. Now, the researchers need to know not only the various research techniques, but also whether they are relevant or not for the particular study by devising newer techniques as well. A similar epidemic is that of chickenpox. Now, in case of Ebola virus, if with the existing set of knowledge that okay, a similar outbreak had happened many years back and they were given an injection and the disease was in control. But that is of a chickenpox injection. Now we are dealing with Ebola virus. What happens here? The researcher needs to know whether administering that chickenpox injection will suffice for the Ebola virus or not. So it is very essential that when a researcher goes on to conduct his research study, he should be very clear about the approach he is employing, whether that approach is practical, the approach is feasible, whether the approach is relevant to that particular mode of study or not. Now, overview of the research methodology. Now, there are 6 branches to know the research methodology. First is program planning. The Maharashtra government, for example, decides to eradicate all cases of jaundice and malaria. Survey department will go in the survey development sector. You will prepare a questionnaire. Now, in that questionnaire, you will be asking the individuals whether they are feeling ill or they are not feeling ill, and so on and forth. Now, survey deployment. You have already developed your survey. Now you will assign groups of people who will help you to go and get the actual survey done. For example, if you want to know that this many people are not feeling well, you have your other set of questionnaire ready, you have a checklist, and you will see, okay, person ABC is saying he is suffering from symptom 1, 2 and 3. So, noting. After that noting has taken place, you will get a huge bunch of papers which will tell you that this is nothing but data analysis is happening now. That you go and you see that, okay, some people are generally suffering from malaria, some people are generally suffering from jaundice. Now, what do? You go and you report it to the health officials of your area. Now, the contribution and review, when after undergoing all of these process 1, 2, 3 and 4, it is established that that particular area, the inhabitants are suffering from, say, jaundice or malaria, they will start dispatching medicines like quinine and so on and so forth. So what is happening? Because you have reported after undergoing process 1, 2, 3 and 4, the step 6 is the contribution. And after a month or so, you come back, you again repeat process 3 and 4. That is, you take another survey saying, how are you feeling now? Do you feel better? Do you strongly agree, strongly disagree that you are better than before? Our medicines has worked out, our medicines hasn't worked out and so on. So this is the process of the review which has taken place. So in this process, what happens is the proper research study is conducted, keeping in view the desired set of directives. Now this is a Coca-Cola ad. Now this has been launched very recently. It's a Coke Zero ad. Now let's go back to this process again. In this particular Coke Zero ad, you see a program planning. How is this ad going to be different than the existing Coca-Cola ad? So in this, what they have done is, this is a drinking Coca-Cola ad. Now generally when you see a Coca-Cola commercial, you either see it visually or in print media, you see it and you flip your pages. That's the end of it. Now, this is the program planning. Now people are done in Coca-Cola that we are done showing print ads, we are done showing visual ads. So now it's time to take on to the newer level of innovation. So what's happening? Program planning is being done here. That is, we are done showing people the page ads, the print ads. We are done showing people how you would see to drink a Coca-Cola on a normal day through your 3D screen. Now we want to give people the experience of drinking it. So what does people did? First, they carried a development of a survey. So the survey probably had questions like, do you drink Coca-Cola often? Do you like it? So based on that, if you don't like it, what is the reason that you don't like it? Do you find the ads appealing? Why don't you find the ads appealing? So on and so forth. Now, before going to the data analysis, strategies need to be employed so that brand gets a stronger branding. So what does Coca-Cola do? In the major outlets of London City, they have put a screen where a bottle of Coca-Cola is placed in the bottle, and then you're supposed to puff through this point. The moment you puff, they will equally play a clip which will be equivalent to you slurping the drink. Now, The human brain is a very fascinating object. We have something called the neurons, the mirror neurons. So, say suppose you are seeing a serial. You start crying after a point of time. You start laughing after a point of time. So what is happening? Your mirror neurons are at work. Now what the mirror neurons are doing? These mirror neurons are doing nothing but replicating your sensory experience to the next level. Now when this cutout of Coca-Cola is placed in the London suburbs, what happens is people are naturally attracted to this cutout. So all that they needed to do was just start slurping it. So the moment the person starts slurping the Coca-Cola, what happens is from here they will play the clip where with each slurp the clip would play the sound. You get that sixth level of comfort where you actually feel that you are drinking Coca-Cola. Now, once you are done with this experiment, what happens? They give you this. It is reported. The people will tell you that, okay, I'm enjoying this process. My neurons are mirroring this process that I'm drinking Coca-Cola and I'm enjoying it. So with that, they will give you a free sample of Coke. Now this entire process has become so highly successful that people are actually wanting this cutout in cities where there is actually no space for traffic to move freely. Why? Because it enlivens their senses, it gives them a heightened view in a way of enjoying that product. So that is how a good research study is conducted. You identify the ongoing knowledge base, you develop it with the help of newer theories, and then with that you implement your newer theories, and at last when the conclusion comes, you know whether you have failed in your research study or not through the success of the project which you have implemented. Now basically the research process finally is divided into these groups. That is, when you start a research process, firstly you define the research problem. Now what is a research problem? You identify the field of your study. In research problem, say suppose today I want to conduct a study on the effect of soda on a person. So that is my research problem. Now review of literature. The review of literature would allow me to look into the existing as well as the current trends in the issue of health studies. For example, review of concepts and theories. Higher consumption of sugar could lead to health disorders, kidney failures, cancers, and so on and for diabetes and all. So you review the previous research which has been found. So say the previous research states that when you drink too much of soda, what happens? You will acquire all the sedentary lifestyle diseases. Now, after reviewing this, you will again formulate your hypothesis stating that if a soda can damage my kidneys, if a soda can damage my liver, the substance which I am putting through my mouth can also harm my teeth. So you formulate the hypothesis. Then you design the research. That is how would you collect this entire process. So you go to places and in the design, sample design, you take a group of people, you test whether the over a prolonged time period will actually affect their bone density, will actually affect their enamel quality or not. Now you collect the data. So the people start drinking soda daily, day in and out, and then one fine day, eureka, someone comes and tells you that due to drinking so much soda, my teeth is getting this color. So what happens? It is in tune with the hypothesis which you are saying. So you are testing the hypothesis that if a soda can bring its bad effects on my body, the vital organs of my body, it will definitely bring its side effects on the starting point of my body, the teeth through which I gulp the can of soda. Now, then you interpret and report that okay, so you decide the very next day to say take a denture and you place it in a glass in a solution of cola. Over a period of days, you find certain amount of discoloration, and with that you establish your hypothesis that okay, timing, it goes back to your research problem where okay, indeed, if there is a overconsumption of soda over prolonged usage over a prolonged time period, what happens is it will destroy the enamel, it will destroy the bone density. So this is just an example. So this is how you go on with your research. First you find the topic, then you go thoroughly into the existing literature review. Now when you create a literature review, you go to the early innings of the topic, and from there you start on stating initially in the literature review like so and so said this. Then you formulate your hypothesis, because it goes on from a long period. You start formulating, okay, post this period I am condensing and I am trying to find out whether this actually works or not. So then you carry on with your program plan, you collect the data, you analyze the data, and finally, employing the various theories, you give your interpretations. Now we come to the important aspect of research design. This is the second unit in the given module, and research design is nothing but the conceptual framework in which a research is conducted. Now, when I say that the conceptual framework in which a research is conducted is nothing but it is the framework or the guidelines through which there is an optimization of the study and it is carried out in an efficient manner. Then it aids in selection of relevant evidences, thereby optimizing the uses of time, money and resources. So in any research study, money is the primary cost. Of course you have cost of money, then you have your resources at stake, you have your energy at stake. So a flexible research design is nothing but a program which will minimize the scope of biases, the scope of errors, and it will maximize the reliability of the work conducted. So in order to conduct a good study, you need a good research design. So now if we are to condense research design, it would mean nothing but the set of frameworks through which you would get the efficient and optimized and accurate research study done by removing all possible errors. Now, what are the features of a good research design? A good research design should be flexible, appropriate, reliable, economic with a low error rate. This first bullet itself condenses the features of a good research design. A research design is essential because the research design would enable you to carry the research process in a systematic manner. So it needs to be flexible. If you are going with a descriptive mode of research study, you cannot say that okay, I will stick only to the descriptive modes of research study. Why? Because you would also require to study it in a empirical manner, probably in an analytical manner, and so on and so forth. So good research design should be flexible, it should be appropriate. Just because you want to conduct Empirical study does not imply that you should be going ahead with it, because there needs to be a certain amount of rationale for the same. Then a good research design should be reliable in nature. So just because you have conducted a research does not imply that, okay, you have submitted your thesis report and you are done with it. There needs to be some amount of accuracy, there needs to be some amount of reliability to the things that you have used, and so on forth. And a research design should be economical in nature. Most of the researchers are government funded. So in order to get the maximized value, it should be economical in nature with a low error rate. That is, you cannot afford to make mistakes while conducting a research study. You may leave it with an abstract idea, but you cannot have a low error rate. Now, since a single research design cannot solve every research problem, it should be useful in the particular purpose in which it is employed. So, like I said, you cannot have a rigid research design, because that research design will not serve the function of the basis of your study. So it should be flexible and it should suit the field of the mode of study. So you just cannot go and employ a diagnostic research process where a descriptive mode of research is required. So if the research design is exploratory or formulative, the design should be flexible to allow the different considerations of the same phenomenon. Now as we see, there are complex studies which take place, for example, in any social setting. Now what happens here is, if the research design is exploratory or formulative in nature, say let's take the example of workplace harassment. So you have the parameters, the different set of rules by which you say that, okay, workplace harassment is indeed taking place over here. So what happens is, you try to formulate why you are thinking that this amount of treatment implies workplace harassment. So it's exploratory by nature. You go, you interview persons in that same office, you see that if everyone is having the same complaints, probably it is sticking to the same considerations of the phenomena of harassment. But if someone says that no, it's only that individual who is facing problems where everyone in this office is fine. So it calls for a psychological study. Now from a socialist, feminist point of study, you are shifting to a psychological basis, probably because the person might be schizophrenic by nature. The person might think that, okay, I am harassed all the time, but the other members of the office might say that no. The problem is with that person. He or she needs counseling. He or she needs to be addressed. So here, the researcher cannot say that I have come only with the mindset of creating a study which is feminist in nature. Even if it is psychological, I will club the entire office saying everyone is suffering from under the hands of this boss. So, okay, the sexual harassment is taking place in this office. That cannot be the thing. A good research design would allow flexibility. A good research design would see the relevance of conducting the study. So, it's no point conducting a feminist study when the problem is actually psychological. So, what happens? Allied researchers take place. Now, if a research design is experimental or hypothetical, it should establish a good relation between the variables and minimize error. Now, if a research design is experimental in nature, say again, I send you to a school to distribute, say, iron supplements. Now, the hypothetical situation is that in villages people are malnourished, they always have deficiency of their iron levels. So what happens is, in this form of research design, what people will do, experiments will be conducted. You will distribute iron tablets, and in that you will see that if certain children are regaining their health, probably your hypothesis was right. Most of the children in rural areas are malnourished. If you see that no, they are suffering from side effects. So what happens? Probably it's not an iron deficiency. Probably it's a folic acid deficiency. Probably it's a fluoride contamination, and so on and forth. So between the variables, it is very important to establish a to find out the actual desired truth and to minimize the error. Not everyone might be suffering from iron deficiency in rural schools. So when you build a good rapport with the villagers and build a good rapport with the children, probably you might know the underlying cause of the diseases. Now, we've been talking about research all this while. Now let's come to this important concept of research design. Now in research design, we have this concept of the variable. Now variable is nothing where variable is a concept which will denote you the value of the aspects which are meant to vary or change in an experiment. The term variable implies that this will change. The value attached to it is meant to fluctuate. It is never constant. So variables are of two types, the independent variable and the dependent variable. Now say if we take the example of how light affects plant growth, let's put a potted plant outside in the sunlight. Now the sun is an independent variable in this case because the sunlight is utilized not only by the plant, the sunlight is utilized by human beings, the sunlight is utilized by the livestock, the sunlight is used for solar energy, so forth. So the sun here is the independent variable. Now this is the dependent variable. The pot of plant is the dependent variable. Why? Because too much of sunlight will kill the plant. Too less of sunlight will also kill the plant. So what is needed? A moderate amount of sunlight is required. So what happens is the independent variable stands and the dependent variable shows its towards the independent variable. That is, the dependent variable is directly proportional to the independent variable and independent variable is indirectly proportional to the dependent variable. That is, in simpler words, if the independent variable is sunlight, it can exist on its own. But the dependent variable, which is the potted plant, its basic existence is there only because of the independent variable, which is the sunlight. Now, apart from dependent and independent variable, we have the extraneous variable. Now, what is an extraneous variable? If you see, the term extraneous is a compound word of extra and near. So extraneous variable implies the extra factors which goes into the making of the variable. Now in this case, the quality of the atmosphere, soil, fertilizer will be the extraneous variable. So dependent variable is the pot of plant. Here independent variable might be the sunshine, might be the watering quality. Come and report that it has died. What does it imply? Algae wet. Probably the soil is fertilized well enough. Probably the atmospheric condition is rainy, so you don't need it. Probably not good enough to sustain life, and so on and forth. So this is the notion of the extraneous variable. Now, another concept is that of control in research design. You see a hand over here. This hand is controlling the puppet. So, the term control in research design simply implies the monitoring of extraneous variable factors in a study to achieve a desired result. So, say for the good growth of a plant, you control the quality of seed to get a better yield. You protect the plant. So what is happening? You are controlling the atmospheric conditions. You are controlling the soil factor. Certain seeds grow on alluvial soil, certain seeds grow on loamy soil, certain seeds need solid black soil. So you are controlling the factors. You are controlling the portions of fertilizers. Why? In order to establish and the independent variable. Now we come to the next concept, that is of compounded relationship. Now when the dependent variable in a research study is not free from the extraneous variable, the relationship between the dependent variable and the independent variable is said to be confounded by the extraneous variable. This seems too much scientific, so let me simplify it. We all know that drinking coffee is not too good for your health. Smoking is not good for your health as well. So now these are the two variables. Now, irrespective of this, we have the heart disease as the other variable. So heart disease is an independent variable over here. So what happens? Coffee drinking. If you drink coffee, it is not necessary that you might get heart disease. If you smoke, it's not necessary that you will get heart disease. You might also get a lung cancer. In fact, in certain places, the levels of caffeine are encouraged as therapy. For example, patients with sleep apnea and all. A certain amount of caffeine is injected in their body to get the desired sleep output results. So, what is happening here? That the extraneous variable of heart disease is there and it is dependent between the relation of smoking too much or the relation of coffee drinking. Now, you cannot say with surety that coffee drinking will lead to heart disease. You cannot say that smoking will lead to heart disease. So, this is not independent of the extraneous variable. Whatever it is, these two might contribute to heart disease, but it will necessarily not give you heart disease. So, this is the confounded relationship. That is where the dependent variable is not free from extraneous factors and the relationship between the dependent and independent variable is then said to be confounded in nature by the extraneous variable. Now we come to research hypothesis. Now a research hypothesis is a statement that is created by a researcher where the notions of prediction between the variables they analyze and the study and the prediction, the outcome of their prediction is seen. So what happens in research hypothesis? You give a statement where you predict that if so and so happens, only then we would get this desired outcome. Like the example of the baby or the example of the plant and so on and so forth, which I have propounded few minutes back in this presentation, where the statement, the predictive statement is given out and it is seen whether employment of that statement stands true with the manipulation of the variables. Now, hypothesis testing is again of two types basically, the experimental and the non-experimental kind. Now, in experimental hypothesis testing, the independent variable is altered, and in non-experimental hypothesis testing, it is non-altered. So, the independent variable, if we go back to the previous slide of this, see, this is here the independent variable is such light, and in proportion to the amount of light given, we go and see the quality of our yield. Now, the independent variable is changed. I am doing away with the sunlight factor. What if it is in a very cold region? What if I am trying to grow a plant in, say, the tundra region? So now we have the independent variable. Now what is happening? That in the non-experimental thing, we are just going with a set of prediction that, okay, if a potted plant is placed under sunlight, under certain given hypothetical situation, the potted plant might yield or the potted plant might not yield. Harvest. But in the experimental hypothesis, we say, what if I alter the sunlight with water and see how the change in the independent variable will cause a change in the dependent variable. So what we are doing? We are doing the experimental hypothesis testing here. Now, here, experimental and control group. So when a group in a research study is exposed to usual conditions, it is called the control group. And when an alteration happens, then they are said to be the experimental group. Now, when Red Bull, the drink which is supposed to be an energy drink, was given to a control group, and these people were made to believe that, okay, drinking say 2 cans of Red Bull a day would make you alert. It will do away with all effects of fatigue, all effects of lethargy, and so on. So here what happens is, this is the control group. You have given them a drink laced with caffeine, and they are aware of the fact that, okay, because I am taking this drink which has caffeine in it, I will be not sleepy. But again, let's see this group, the experimental group. What happens is, the drink is spiked. So instead of caffeine, I add other substances into it just to see whether the effects are happening or not. So what happens is, in that experimental group, I might just give them plain soda without caffeine. I might just give them a regular soda and say, this is Red Bull. So you are now not supposed to feel sleepy. Or I might spike their drink with some alcoholic substance. So I might spike their drink with some sedative. So what is happening? The difference between the control group and the experimental group is starkly seen. Where given a certain situation, if an alteration is taking place, visible changes are seen in the final outcome of the study. Treatment. We are using the word treatment on and off even when we were discussing about the various research methods. Now, treatment is nothing but the different conditions in which the experimental and control groups are kept. It's called the treatment in research design. This is a mean. So the control group of people have been given the proper caffeinated drink, and they are in control that, okay, this amount of caffeine would tweak my brain cells and I would be alert and active for this many hours of the day. Now what's happening here? Out of control group, I spiked their drinks. I have put alcohol, I have put certain amount of sedative. So there is no monitoring which is happening. I have purposely altered the variable in order to get the desired result. Now we come to the types of experiment. Now experiment is nothing but the process of examining the truth. Now, the experiment is basically of two types: absolute experiment and comparative experiment. Now, in absolute experiment, say this is a particular variety of crops, and we add a fertilizer X on this crop and we measure the yield. Say we take a crop of rice and in that we put fertilizer X, and we see that the crop of rice is used to the fertilizer X, it's a success, and there is a high yield in the variety or production of rice. Now, instead of rice, we take a mango crop. Now what we do? We alter the crop, but we put in the same fertilizer. So what is happening over here is the fertilizer X's effect is seen on crop Y and experiment has taken place. Absolute experiment is nothing but you need to absolutely know, if given a certain variable, what effect will that independent variable have on the dependent variable. The comparative experiment is if there are two dependent variables and if there is an alteration of the independent variable or there is no alteration of the independent variable, the result yielded would give us a comparative analysis of the effect of the fertilizer X on crop Y. So that is the comparative experiment. Now we come to types of research design. All this while we were talking about research design. Now we come to three categories of research design: the quantitative research design, the qualitative research design, the combined qualitative and quantitative research design. Based on these groups, the quantitative research design has been subdivided into the experimental, the correlational and the survey research. The qualitative research design has been divided into grounded theory research, ethnographic research and narrative research, and the combined qualitative and quantitative research design has been given into the mixed method and action research. Now in the next slide onwards, we will be going into detail into what each of these research designs means. Okay. The first aspect of quantitative research design is the experimental research design. Now, experimental research is basically observation under control parameters. They are concerned with the examination of the effect of independent variable on the dependent variable and whether the independent variable is manipulated through treatments or intervention, and the effect of this is studied in the dependent variable. I think I've already expressed myself from the previous slide how this experimental research takes place. So, if not the soda can example, if we see the introduction of, say, a new curriculum, a new subject in a school curriculum, for example, if, say, Sanskrit is made compulsory for all children who are studying in the state boards. So what happens? Now, if we alter it, that okay, we place in that particular classroom students who are already aware of that language, and we take out certain students who are not aware of the language, and we see a result, that experiment would imply that in case the independent variable is altered, then we have a change in the outcome, and in case the independent variable is not altered, then the desired outcome remains the same. Here, there's this example of photosynthesis itself. So the control measure is nothing but water and light. So with light and no water, the plant withers. Lots of water, no light, the plant withers. So this is an example of an experimental research where controlled variable is water and light, and with an alteration of the state, we see whether there is a difference in the final outcome. Now we have correlational research. Now, in this method, the possible degree to which two variables are related is studied together. So, correlational. Co is one word. Co means they exist together. Relational. There is a relationship. So here, try to see the relationship in which the two variables exist. So the first variable is called the predictor variable, and the next variable is called the criterion variable. Now, suggesting a relationship between the criterion and the predictor variable, this method does not do away with causation. That is, there is no experimental variation between the factors. So, what happens is, again, let's take the example of brushing your teeth and not brushing your teeth, consuming too much of sweets. Okay, so brushing your teeth would keep your tooth decay at bay. Consuming sweets and not brushing of your teeth might result in cavities or tooth decay. Relationship we are suggesting with tooth decay. Now the thing is, if I stop brushing my teeth, not necessarily I might suffer from tooth decay. Of course, I will eventually, but if I'm brushing my teeth regularly and I'm not stopping the consumption of sweets at the same time, what is happening? I'm still having tooth decay. So we cannot blame that because of brushing or because of not brushing, tooth decay is happening or tooth decay is not happening. So this is a kind of correlational research. That is, you take the two variables and you try to find out the relationship between the variables, and you see why the predictor variable and the criterion variable coexist with one another. But it does not necessarily imply that because the predictor is there, so it is calling this to the criterion variable. No, that doesn't happen in correlational research. Now, correlational research is basically of two types. The positive correlational research and the negative correlational research. Now, example of a negative correlational research. This is a teacher, classic teacher, who is coming and telling you, okay, because you are missing most of your classes, so your grades are lower than usual. I might even have a batch of students who are attending my classes regularly, but still their grades are lower. The reason could be varied. The child might be busy doing other work. The child is trying his best to balance the time between his studies and extracurricular activities. So the extraneous variables cannot be looked out. So in negative correlational research, we try to take a deduction and we attribute that deduction to the impending outcome. So it is very shallow in nature, that just because you're not attending classes, your grades are falling, though there could be various extraneous variables which are not looked into it. So we are just directly looking into the relation between the predictor and the criterion. I'm predicting your low grades. The criterion here is because you're not attending class. Then we have positive correlational research. Now what happens in a positive correlational research? There is a direct relationship between two variables. So here Meditation increases levels of concentration. I'm just trying to establish the relation between meditation and a good level of concentration and calmness just because it seems appropriate. So there is a direct relation over here that good habits would give rise to a good outcome. So there is a positive relationship over here. Then we come to survey research. Now survey research is nothing but it is a measurement procedure that involves asking questions to respondents. So a survey can be anything from short paper pencil feedback to an in-depth one or an interview. So here in this caricature, it's just a caricature survey research where you can see one person carrying out a questionnaire, and this questionnaire is analyzed by the researcher. So that is one aspect of the research. Of survey research. Now we come to grounded theory research. Grounded theory research is a systematic qualitative procedure used to generate a theory that explains a broad conceptual level, a process, an action, or an interaction about a substantive topic. For example, in a grounded theory kind of research, basically, say I give you certain Lego blocks, and out of this various components of the Lego box, you club them together, or and you form a structure. Or say I give you pieces of jigsaw puzzle which are all jumbled and strewn into the floor. Now what would you do? Ideally, you would try to culminate each of the processes, the lost pieces, and you would bring the entire puzzle into a whole thing. So here what is happening? First you formulate the question on what your research problem is to be based upon. Then you begin the theoretical sampling. So the research questions, for example, could be anything like, has the quality of life deteriorated with the lower income groups, or has the children of the lower income groups not able to perform well because of the low income? Okay, so the theoretical sampling will be what? You will see that because the lower income group of people cannot afford the study material, hence there could be an impact on the success of the students belonging to that strata of the society. Now you go, you interview them, you transcribe and you contact them. So what you do, post your decision to conduct that experiment, braced up with your theoretical nature, you go and you conduct the experiment in that set group of students. So this could be such that you go and you interview the children. What time do you come? Do you get enough time to study? Do you get your meals on time? And so on and forth. Then you contact and you keep a note of those children. Data containing. Amongst those group of children, you will find certain group of children belong to parents who tend to work hard. You have certain groups of children whose parents are maids, who are employed as watchmen, and they are trying their best with their meager income to provide for the children who will be sent to schools, irrespective of the hardships the parents are facing. And then when you go and analyze these children, you'll find one group of children will be genuinely trying hard to make the best out of such situation. Then you'll have a group of children who might get used by drugs and substance abuses and all, and so they genuinely have no reason to study harder, nor they are inclined towards it. So you develop what you do. You are developing conceptual categories over here. That is, children who fall below the poverty line if in the case of substance abuse there is a remarkable deterioration in their study process, and children of poverty line, again, who are diligent enough and who want to study harder will be outperforming the students the children of parents who are from an economically higher strata of society. There is a constant which is happening here. So what is happening here is the constant comparison. Rich children, due to the abundance of facilities, they are performing well. Rich children, due to abundance of facilities but misuse of facilities, are not performing well. Poor children, due to lack of facilities, are not performing well. Poor children, due to lack of facilities with external factors like substance abuse, are not performing well. However, pure children with less amount of money, who are willing to work hard, who are determined enough, are doing well. So what you are doing? You are doing an analytic memory. You are sub-grounding it. Now, after this analysis, what you do? Of the prevailing society, the effect of children studying in government schools can be seen varied in nature. So, you are bringing in studies of caste, you are bringing in theories of religion, you are bringing in theories of marxism, you are bringing in a capitalist economy. So, you are grounding your research work based on theory. So, this is how a grounded theory research takes place. The next is the ethnographic study. Now, an ethnographic study is an in-depth study of a naturally occurring behavior within a cultural or social group. It seeks to understand the relationship between culture and behavior, with culture referring to beliefs, values and attitudes of the specific group. So what happens in an ethnographic study? Basically this study is employed by anthropologists. Now what do these anthropologists do? They go and they settle themselves into that area of study, and from then on they give us insight into human motives, culture, the behavior and so on forth. Now ethnographic study is usually an on-site study. So basically ethnographic study is done in 3 ways. The first is the field-based ethnographic study. The second is a digital ethnographic study, and the third is a photo ethnographic study. Now in field-based ethnographic study, what happens is the ethnographer, the researcher here is called an ethnographer. So the ethnographer gives us a deeper insight about the target user. So a person or group of persons are observed by the ethnographer while they lead their normal life. So what happens in field study? The ethnographer photographer himself goes and starts staying with the people. So this is the basis of an ethnographic study. Then we have the digital ethnographic study, where it is considered to be faster. So you are staying in a particular tribe. Say for example, today we want to find out about the Sentinelist population, of course, of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Now that is an area where people generally do not go there. So what do these anthropologists do? They start observing them from a given time period. They start picking up their whistles, which are also the signals or the means of communication. And in olden days, what they used to do is, they tried their best to mingle with these people. Most of them have lost their life for the same, but they tried their best to stay on field, and later they publish reports at the end of their desired study process. Now, computational tools like the smartphones, your tablets and all, what happens is, whenever they see something worth recording, worth observing, they immediately, what do? They transmit it to the higher authority who is monitoring the research project. Now, photo ethnography is highly useful when the presence of the ethnographer is seen in places where the people's behavior can be drastically seen altered. So what happens is, in a place like this Sentosa Island, where people are not allowed to go, what happens is, because they cannot go, so from a helicopter they can click photographs. From a boat, without disturbing the people, they can stay on the sea and they can click photographs of the people who are there. So this is the way the ethnographic research method takes place. And then we have the narrative research. In narrative research, the focus is on studying a single person and gathering data through the collection of studies that are used to construct stories about individual experiences and the meanings they attribute to them. So, if you see any of the stills of National Geographic, or let alone National Geographic, say, let's take the example of the novel Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. Now, in this novel, the narrator or the person is an elderly man who is off the coast of Africa, and he relates to people about how he survived in that forest amongst the people. So he describes about his ordeals in the jungle setting, where people are not civilized, where the inhabitants of that region are not civilized enough. They are savage, they are barbaric. So what they are doing? They are recording the individual experience. People were barbaric. They didn't know what to do in a civilized society. Then you go to the chronology of the experience. From what time were you there? And has there been a change in the processes from this time period to that time period? Then what happens is, you start collecting individual theories. So if the person concerned goes and tells you that I have faced it. So in this particular novel, what happens is, the protagonist of the novel, he sets his experiences into the deep and dense jungles of Africa. And he also has another individual who succumbs to the ordeals of that place. So what you're doing, you're collecting individual stories. I was there, I survived, my friend didn't survive. And you go and contact the relatives of the friends who also say, yes, they were with me, but my loved one didn't come back, but he did. So then you start coding for themes. Then what happens is, when you club the themes of terror, when you club the themes of barbarism, when you club the themes of post-colonialism, and so on and so forth, you are creating the context of a proper jungle story. Now what you are doing? You are restoring. That is, you are using the individual's experience and the attributes he connotes to them in order to this story. So that is the narrative research. Narrative researches are basically autobiographical in nature, and in narrative research, the key to the research is collaboration with the participants. So narrative research is also participatory in nature, and in narrative researches, the individual's experience are historicized, set in time, hence the chronotop nature. You collect the information, there is a data collection, and from there you build it up on your own, employing your set of theories, and hence restoring happens. Then we come to the mixed method of research. Now, mixed method is used by both qualitative and quantitative fields of study, but since it's very large and it's very huge, it is not possible to employ all of it all the time. It is very time consuming, it is expensive. One design of research study itself is very time consuming, let alone comparing it. However, it has its own benefits that probably you get an in-depth understanding. But see, this is the pros and cons of mixed methods. So you are the research scientist here, you are using your feedback forms, you are using post or performance reviews, training pilots. All of these are what? The quantitative aspects. Interviews are also there. Okay, now it's saying here, the way I feel is hard to quantify. This person is hell-bent on saying how hard on a scale of 1 to 10. So you're forcefully combining two very dominant research process with the thought that you will achieve a higher goal. But not only is this process time consuming, but this process is also futile. Then we have action-based research. Now, action-based research is basically dependent on planning, acting, observing, and reflecting. So what happens in an action-based research? You first consider the problem. The problem could be anything, and then you see the situation in a way. For example, if you have to identify the functionings of the election system in India, just an example. So you see the interest of partners. Many people might not want to go into those election areas which are said to be infested with many killers and perpetrators and so on. So, but there is also the urgency to know why it is not happening. Then department initiatives, that is, the election department will see to it that you are safely deported into that election zone and you carry out the election process. Political influences is there. Each party wants his or her candidate to win. So they might either sabotage the machine, so you need to take the precautionary measures. The local culture. With each election officer, you also have a person who knows the local language. So that specifically in the terrorist-infested regions, you are aware of what the local people are trying to say and what the interpreters are trying to convey. Then you apply the findings to a ground reality and you try to communicate the findings. As a result of which, what happens? You are analyzing the ways and means in which you think you can stop the crime, and then you develop research steps, you conduct the research steps, and you analyze the results. So going into that area, you realize that this election procedure is not able to be conducted because of the influence of the terrorists, because of the influence of the ruling parties, because of the influence of the policemen. So this is the action-based research. What happens is, you are planning on conducting, you are acting on it, you are observing, and at the end of the day, when you submit your report, you reflect on the pros and cons, which leads to the success or the destabilization of the entire election process. So this is an example of action-based research. Now, in terms of exploratory studies, it's the same process we go. We understand the subject, we empathize it, define it, ideate it, make a prototype, test it, and then we go on looking for the results. Now, in terms of descriptive studies and diagnostic studies, say for example, post-traumatic stress disorder. The descriptive study would say that civilians who return from the war are traumatized to that extent that they cannot deal in a normal setting. They have difficulty readjusting to civilian life. Diagnostic study, we already have a prescribed manual, the DSM classification. So the diagnostic and statistical manual would say that if symptom 1 to 10 is seen individual, the individual is said to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. Now what is happening here? In tune with the symptoms, we are trying to find the causes of the triggering causes which would initiate the side effects of post-traumatic stress disorders, which are flashbacks, fears, anxieties, and so on and so on. So what happens? The group of scientists might use a video game. Now the moment the war veteran who is trying to cope up in a normal setting, the moment he plays a video game which is shown to kill people in a war-like setting, it would immediately trigger. His mirror neurons would place him in the same setting. So what is happening? He is getting triggered. The symptoms are telling, and this is how a diagnostic study process is carried out. So again, the third kind of research design is the hypotesting studies, where the theory is propounded and generalized observations are done. The observations can be either inductive in nature or deductive in nature. You test your hypothesis, draw on your observations, and then you get your desired results. Now, these are the basic principles of experimental design. That is the principles of replication, randomization, and local control. In randomization, the allocation of treatment is different to the experimental plot. In replication, the repetition is happening, and in error control, you are taking the precautions to control the error. Error control is also known as local control. Now, in principle of replication, the experiment should be conducted in such a way that, for example, if you have a plot of land and you need to see the yielding variety of a particular seed. So what you'll do, you will take two varieties of rice, and in order to apply the principle of replication, you firstly divide the field into several sectors, and from there onwards, what you do, you plant the seeds, and then with the output received, you try to have an insight of the division which takes place in two sectors of the field. The principle of randomization is such that we should conduct the experiment in such a way that the extraneous factors can be combined under the general heading of chance. For example, again, if we grow rice in a field divided into two halves, what we'll see? We'll see that given the same factors, the quality of the harvest